Hello, dear friend. Welcome to this quiet moment we're sharing together. Take a deep breath with me now. In and out. Let yourself settle into wherever you are right now. Perhaps your bed, your favorite chair, or that cozy corner where you feel most at peace. Tonight, I want to take you on a gentle journey to a small cafe tucked away in the heart of Paris. But before we begin, let's create some space for calm. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, or simply let your gaze soften on something nearby. Let's count down together, slowly, gently, like the soft tick of an old clock in a quiet room. 10. Feel your shoulders releasing any tension they've been holding. 9. Let your jaw unclench. Your tongue rest softly in your mouth. 8. Notice your breathing, how it flows naturally, like a gentle stream. 7. Allow your thoughts to slow, like leaves drifting down from autumn trees. 6. Feel yourself sinking deeper into this moment of peace. 5. Your body growing heavier, more relaxed with each number. 4. Your mind becoming quieter, like a lake at dawn. 3. Any worries from today dissolving like morning mist. 2. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you need to be. 1. And now, let's step together into our story. The rain began without warning. As Parisian rain often does in late autumn, Elise had been walking through the narrow streets of the 5th arrondissement, her manuscript pages tucked safely in her leather satchel, when the first drops began to kiss the cobblestones around her feet. She wasn't hurrying. These days, Elise rarely hurried anywhere. At 34, she had learned that rushing toward something often meant rushing away from herself. And she had been away from herself quite enough lately. The droplets grew heavier, pattering against the slate roofs above like gentle fingers drumming a lullaby. The sound echoed softly between the old stone buildings, creating a symphony of water and history. Elise pulled her cream-colored wool coat closer around her shoulders, feeling the soft cashmere lining against her skin. It had been 3 months since Marcus had moved out, taking his espresso maker and his certainty with him. 3 months since her editor had gently suggested she take some time to find her voice again. 3 months of floating through her days like a ghost in her own life, watching other people live with the kind of purposeful energy that seemed to have leaked out of her somewhere along the way. The rain was falling in earnest now, creating silver streams along the gutters and pooling in the uneven spaces between ancient stones. The air filled with that particular scent of wet Paris, a mixture of rain on warm stone, the faint aroma of café au lait drifting from nearby windows, and something indefinably old and romantic that seemed to live in the very walls of the city. Elise found herself on Rue des Écoles, though she couldn't quite remember deciding to turn down this particular street. Her feet had simply carried her here, as if they knew something her mind did not. The rain was soaking through her coat now, and she could feel cool droplets sliding down the back of her neck. That's when she noticed it. A small wooden sign, hand-painted in elegant script, Café des Murmures, the Cafe of Whispers. She had walked this street dozens of times in the past months, but somehow had never seen this place before. The cafe was tucked between a used bookshop and a flower vendor. So narrow, it seemed almost impossibly small. Through rain-streaked windows, she could see the warm amber glow of old Edison bulbs casting gentle shadows across cream-colored walls. Steam was fogging the glass from the inside, creating an almost dreamlike veil between the cold, wet street and whatever warmth lay beyond that dark green door. Without really deciding, Elise found her hand on the brass door handle, worn smooth by countless other hands seeking shelter from countless other storms. The door opened with a soft chime, not the harsh electronic beep of modern establishments, but the gentle ring of an actual small bell, the kind that might have announced visitors a century ago. As she stepped inside, a wave of warmth enveloped her, like an embrace from an old friend. The air was thick with the rich aroma of coffee beans, not the harsh, bitter smell of over-roasted commercial blends, but something deeper, more complex. French roast, mixed with hints of vanilla and perhaps cardamom, creating a scent that seemed to wrap around her shoulders like a soft shawl. The cafe was indeed tiny, perhaps only 6 small tables, each with mismatched chairs that somehow belonged together perfectly. The walls were painted a warm cream color, decorated with old photographs of Paris in sepia tones. In one corner, a small fireplace held a few glowing embers, just enough to chase away the dampness of the rain without overwhelming the intimate space. Behind a curved counter that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark wood, a woman with silver-streaked hair was grinding coffee beans by hand in an old brass mill. She looked up as Elise entered, offering a smile that was warm but undemanding, the kind of smile that said, "You are welcome here," without requiring anything in return. "Bonjour," the woman said softly, her voice carrying the musical quality that seemed to live in the French language. "Quite a sudden shower, isn't it?" Elise nodded, suddenly aware of how she must look. Hair damp and slightly wild from the wind, coat spotted with rain, carrying the particular aura of someone who had been wandering without destination. But the woman's eyes held no judgment, only a gentle kindness that made Elise feel like she could breathe a little deeper for the first time in weeks. "Please, sit wherever you feel comfortable," the woman continued, returning to her coffee, grinding with a slow, rhythmic motion that was almost meditative. "I'm Marie. I'll bring you something warm in just a moment." Elise chose a small table by the window, where she could watch the rain painting its temporary art across the glass. She slipped off her damp coat and draped it over the back of a chair. A simple wooden chair, painted pale blue, with a seat cushion covered in fabric that depicted tiny lavender sprigs. As she settled into her seat, Elise became acutely aware of the textures around her. The wooden table beneath her fingertips was smooth and worn, with tiny imperfections that spoke of years of use. Ring stains from countless coffee cups, small scratches that might have been carved by wedding rings or nervous fingernails. The cushion beneath her was soft but firm, filled perhaps with real feathers rather than synthetic stuffing. The sounds of the café began to separate themselves in her awareness. The gentle hiss of steam from an espresso machine, but operated so quietly, it was more like a whisper than the aggressive roar she was used to in larger establishments. The soft scratch of Marie's movements behind the counter, the clink of porcelain against porcelain, and underneath it all, the steady rhythm of rain against the windows, like nature's own percussion section playing a lullaby for the city. Through the rain-blurred window, Elise could see people hurrying past with umbrellas and newspapers held over their heads. But inside this small sanctuary, time seemed to move differently, slower, more deliberately, as if the walls themselves were insisting that everything within should be savored rather than rushed. Marie appeared at her table with a small tray, moving with the unhurried grace of someone who had long ago learned that haste was rarely necessary. On the tray was a cup of coffee in porcelain, so delicate it was almost translucent, decorated with tiny painted roses. Beside it, a small glass of water and a single almond biscuit on a plate no larger than her palm. "Café au lait," Marie said simply, setting the cup before Elise. "With just a touch of real vanilla. I thought you might need something gentle today." The coffee was perfect, rich and smooth, with the kind of deep flavor that could only come from beans that had been roasted with attention and care. The milk had been steamed to exactly the right temperature, creating a drink that warmed her from the inside out without scalding. The vanilla was subtle, just a whisper of sweetness that enhanced rather than overwhelmed the coffee's natural complexity. As Elise sipped, she found herself noticing things she hadn't paid attention to in months. The way the steam from her cup rose in delicate spirals, catching the amber light from the bulbs above. The way the rain on the window created ever-changing patterns of light and shadow on the cream-colored walls. the way her body was finally beginning to release tension she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. She had been holding herself so tightly for so long, holding her breath, holding her emotions, holding onto a version of herself that no longer fit. But here, in this small space that existed somehow outside the regular flow of Paris, she could feel herself beginning to soften, like butter left out to reach room temperature. The almond biscuit dissolved on her tongue with the perfect balance of sweet and nutty flavors. It had clearly been made by hand, with the slightly irregular shape and tender crumb that spoke of someone who baked for love rather than efficiency. Each bite seemed to carry the warmth of the oven it had emerged from, the care of hands that had measured and mixed and shaped with attention. Elise found herself thinking about her manuscript, the novel she had been struggling to complete for the better part of 2 years. It was the story of a woman not unlike herself, someone who had become lost in the space between who she had been and who she was becoming. Her editor had said the writing felt distant, that she needed to find her way back to the emotional truth at the center of the story. But sitting here, with rain creating music against the windows and the taste of real vanilla warming her throat, Elise began to understand what had been missing. She had been writing about disconnection while holding herself separate from her own experience. She had been trying to describe emptiness while refusing to feel it fully. The rain outside was beginning to soften, changing from the sharp percussion of a sudden storm to the gentle whisper of drops that might continue for hours. Through the window, the light was taking on that particular quality that Paris possessed on rainy afternoons, a soft, silvery glow that made everything look like an impressionist painting coming to life. Elise pulled out her small notebook, the one she always carried but rarely used anymore. The leather cover was worn soft from years of being tucked into pockets and bags, and the pages inside held fragments of observations, half-formed thoughts, the occasional phone number or grocery list. She found a clean page and began to write, not about her fictional character, but about this moment, the weight of the porcelain cup in her hands, the sound of Marie humming something wordless behind the counter, the feeling of her shoulders finally dropping away from her ears. The words came slowly at first, then with increasing ease. She wrote about the texture of the rain on glass, about the way warmth could enter your body through more than just temperature, how it could arrive through kindness, through beauty, through the simple act of being allowed to exist without judgment or expectation. As she wrote, Elise became aware that she was not the only patron in the café. At a corner table, an elderly man sat reading a book, occasionally making notes in the margins with a fountain pen that scratched softly against the paper. Near the fireplace, a young woman was sketching in a large pad, her pencil creating gentle shading sounds as she worked. None of them spoke to each other. but their presence created a comfortable sense of shared solitude, the particular peace that comes from being alone together with strangers who ask nothing of you. The coffee in her cup had cooled to the perfect drinking temperature, and Elise found herself taking smaller and smaller sips, wanting to make this moment last. Outside, the afternoon light was beginning to shift toward evening, though the rain continued its steady, soothing rhythm. She thought about Marcus, but for the first time in months, the thought carried no sharp edges. She could see now that their relationship had been like this storm, something that had arrived without warning and departed the same way, leaving behind only the clean scent of rain on stone. There had been love there, but it had been the kind of love that requires constant tending, constant effort, constant vigilance against the forces that might wash it away. What she felt now, sitting in this small sanctuary with her notebook open and her breathing finally even, was different. It was the kind of peace that existed independent of external circumstances, the kind of contentment that arose from simply being present with what was actually happening. Marie moved between her few customers like a dancer who had long ago memorized all her steps. She refilled the elderly man's water glass without being asked, brought the young artist a fresh pencil when the tip of her current one wore down, and somehow managed to appear at Elise's table just as her cup emptied. "Another?" Marie asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Please," Elise replied, surprised by the sound of her own voice. She hadn't spoken in over an hour, and the word came out after than she had intended, as if the quiet of the café had infected her vocal cords. This second cup tasted even better than the first, perhaps because she was no longer drinking it as shelter from the rain, but as a choice to remain in this space that had somehow become sacred. The vanilla seemed more present this time, the coffee richer, as if her palate was awakening after months of numbness. She continued writing, her pen moving across the page with increasing confidence. She wrote about the way loneliness could be transformed by solitude, about the difference between being abandoned and being set free. She wrote about the sound of rain as a kind of permission to move more slowly, to notice more carefully, to exist without apology or explanation. The light outside was definitely changing now, taking on the golden quality that preceded sunset. Even through the soft gray filter of the rain clouds, the artificial lights inside the café seemed to grow warmer in response, creating pools of amber illumination that made every surface glow with quiet beauty. Elise realized she had filled nearly 10 pages in her notebook, more than she had written in the past month combined. But more than that, she had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not answers, exactly, but a different quality of question. Instead of asking, "What am I supposed to do with my life?" she found herself wondering, What wants to emerge from this moment? The rain was definitely lighter now, transitioning from the steady percussion of a storm to the gentle whisper of drops that might continue indefinitely. Through the window, she could see people beginning to emerge from doorways and shop entrances, but their movements were unhurried, as if the rain had taught them something about the value of slowing down. Elise closed her notebook and simply sat, breathing in the complex aromatics of the cafe: coffee and vanilla, old wood and fresh flowers, the clean scent of rain-washed air drifting in each time the door opened. She felt like someone who had been holding her breath underwater and had finally surfaced, filling her lungs with air she had forgotten could taste so sweet. Marie appeared at her table one more time, this time carrying a small plate with a single chocolate truffle. The chocolate was dark and glossy, dusted with what looked like cocoa powder mixed with gold flakes. From the chocolatier next door, Marie explained, setting the plate down with a gentle smile. She brings them over when the weather turns melancholy. Says chocolate is the best medicine for rainy afternoons. The truffle melted on Elise's tongue like a small miracle. Dark chocolate with hints of cognac and orange. The kind of flavor that seemed to contain entire conversations about pleasure and patience and the art of taking time with beautiful things. As the sweetness faded, Elise found herself thinking about her life with something approaching tenderness rather than frustration. The past few months hadn't been a failure or a breakdown, she realized. They had been a kind of composting, all the old certainties breaking down into rich soil where something new could eventually grow. She didn't know yet what that something might be. The novel might or might not ever get finished. She might or might not find her way back to the kind of love that had sustained her relationship with Marcus. She might or might not discover the clear sense of purpose that seemed to guide other people through their days with such confidence. But for the first time in months, those unknowns felt like possibilities rather than failures. They felt like the kind of open space where unexpected gifts might appear, like small cafes tucked into streets she had walked 100 times before, like strangers who offered warmth without expectation, like the discovery that solitude and loneliness were entirely different countries. The rain outside had softened to the merest whisper now, individual drops catching the light from street lamps that were just beginning to flicker on. The afternoon was transitioning to evening with the gradual grace that only rainy days possessed. No dramatic sunset, just a slow fade from silver to charcoal, like watching someone fall asleep. Elise knew she would need to leave soon, would need to step back out into the world of schedules and expectations and the 100 small decisions that make up a day. But not yet. For now, she was content to sit in this small sanctuary, watching the light change and feeling her breathing slow and deep. She thought about the woman she had been when she first pushed through that green door, driven by nothing more than the need to escape the rain. That woman had been carrying so much grief that felt too large for her body, confusion that buzzed in her head like static, a loneliness so profound it had become a kind of constant background noise. The woman sitting here now was not different, exactly, but transformed, like the rain itself, which was still water, whether it fell as a storm or whispered as mist. She was still herself, but in a different form, softer, more permeable, more willing to be touched by beauty. The Café des Murmures continued to hold its small collection of strangers in warm, golden silence. The elderly man turned pages with the soft whisper of aged paper. The young artist added delicate shadows to her drawing. Marie moved behind the counter with the unhurried grace of someone who understood that some moments were too precious to rush. And Elise sat by the rain-softened window, her notebook closed, her coffee finished, her breathing finally, fully her own again. Outside, Paris was beginning its transition from day to evening, the city lights starting to reflect in puddles that would disappear by morning, leaving only the memory of this gentle, transformative rain. She would leave soon, would walk back through streets that gleamed with wetness, would return to her small apartment with its empty bookshelves and its silence that was no longer lonely, but simply quiet. She would sit at her desk and perhaps continue writing, or perhaps she would simply make herself tea and watch the last of the rain draw patterns on her own windows. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, bringing with it all the usual questions and decisions and small moments of joy or sorrow that make up a human life. But tonight, she would carry with her the warmth of this small sanctuary, the taste of vanilla and kindness, the sound of rain transformed from storm to lullaby. And maybe that was enough. Maybe transformation didn't require dramatic gestures or sudden revelations. Maybe it happened the way rain soaked into dry earth, slowly, gently, changing everything from the inside out. The café held them all, Elise and the elderly reader, and the young artist, and Marie with her gentle wisdom, in its amber light and coffee-scented warmth. And the rain continued its soft percussion against the windows, playing them all to sleep, like a mother humming wordlessly to her children, like the city itself whispering good night to all its wanderers who had found their way, finally, to exactly where they needed to be. In the morning, the sun would shine, and the puddles would steam and disappear, and the city would resume its usual pace. But the Café des Murmures would remain, tucked away in its narrow space between the bookshop and the flower vendor, ready to offer shelter to the next storm-soaked soul who might need nothing more than warmth and time, and the revolutionary act of being allowed to simply exist. And Elise would remember this afternoon like a gift, the the discovery that sometimes the thing you're searching for finds you instead. That sometimes getting lost is the only way to arrive where you belong. That sometimes the gentlest transformations are the most profound ones of all. The rain whispered against the windows. The coffee cooled in empty cups. The light faded to the softest charcoal. And in the space between raindrops, between heartbeats, between one breath and the next, everything was exactly as it should be. And now, dear friend, as our story draws to its gentle close, like the rain softening to silence, allow yourself to sink deeper into your own comfort. Feel the weight of your body supported, your breathing slow and natural, your mind as quiet as that small cafe in the fading light. You too are exactly where you need to be. In this moment, in this breath, in this space between waking and dreaming, where all the best stories live. Let the rain wash away anything you no longer need to carry. Let the warmth surround you like Marie's gentle kindness. Let yourself drift like Elise into the sweet peace of not needing to be anywhere else, anyone else, anything other than exactly who you are right now. Sleep well, dear friend, sleep well.